Welcome, everybody. My name is Mina Jane, and I'm the director of the Ashland Public Library in Massachusetts. And I'm very pleased to be here with Alexandria House, Ines Johnson, and Katrina Jackson. And we're going to be talking about indie publishing and being a Black author and Black History Month and all kinds of important things and also fun things. But before we get to our actual conversation, I just want to say thanks to the Ashland Public Library, the Friends of the Ashland Public Library, who support all of our programming, and also to our authors who let us share this with other libraries. Because as most people, anybody who knows me knows that I think when libraries work together, we make magic. So we are going to be chatting away. Feel free to put questions in the Q&A, which is a button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And you can use the chat to chat with each other, and the authors might actually join in some of the chat if they feel like it. So welcome, Alexandria, Ines, and Katrina. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to say that I started asking authors to do this panel because I was really interested in indie romance publishing because it is just such a huge thing right now. And I think that all of our authors are just epitome of like how to make that successful. So I was really pleased when they all said yes to this. So I'm just going to hand it over to you guys and ask you to tell us about yourself and maybe your most recent book. So I'm going to start with Alexandria. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm Alexandria House. I am a former RN turned romance author. I do this full time, and I want to say last count, I had like maybe 30 books under my belt. I do write contemporary African American romance. I have one paranormal, and a whole lot of erotica. So I'm in Arkansas, and my most recent book was actually a short called 24/7. It's very steamy and very short, but it's basically nothing but steam. And my last full novel was Holding, which is book 2 in my hockey, St. Louis Sires hockey series. And right now, I'm getting ready to release book 3 in that series.
Well, Ines, tell us about yourself and your most recent book.
Hi guys, I'm Ines. I write kissing books, and I'm a screenwriter turned novelist. Been reading Harlequin since I was 12. My favorite story to tell is that my godmother, instead of her pantry being lined with cans and pancake mix and stuff, her pantry was lined with Harlequins. It was my first library, and she said I could just take whatever book I wanted. And at the time, it was those tiny little Harlequins, like the silhouettes, and there was nothing but crashing waves going on, so she knew I was fine. But that started my love. But I went into television first because I was a complete after school special Saturday morning cartoons convert. Learned screenwriting, was in television, taught screenwriting for a number of years, and then started writing really, really steamy books as I was working in children's television. And my latest release is the third book in my Grim Valley series, which is small town romance, steamy small town romance with that are all fairy tale retellings, but set in modern day with absolutely no magic. And the third book out is Beautiful Beast, which is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. And the heroine was inspired by a conference that I went to along with Kat, where I learned that someone was trying to build the largest archive of African American romance in the country. And I totally gave my heroine that job. And her hero reads nothing but classic literature, and he's writing a military memoir, and they are enemies with benefits.
I also like from your website, you write about strong women who suck at love.
Yes. They're the ones that need the help.
True. Katrina?
So I'm Katrina Jackson, and I write a lot of different things centering on erotica. If I can make it erotic, I'm happy. My latest release was And When You Leave Me, which is a sad erotic ghost love story about a woman sort of mourning the loss of her husband. With the help of his ghost, she finds that she will survive and learn to love again. Because I also like writing sad stories. sad people also need orgasms. Um, and right now I'm working on a few different things. One of them being the next book in my spy series, because I also love romantic suspense.
Mhm. Wow.
Mm.
Okay, so I'm going to go back in time a little bit and ask you each about your writing journey. So, Ines, when did you start knowing that you wanted to be a writer? You were already reading like romance at 12 and probably reading a lot of stuff before then.
Well, I always knew I wanted to be a storyteller. I just wasn't sure what kind. I grew up in a band, and my dad, with the first lesson that I've carried through every form of storytelling with me, is my dad breaking down how music is made, how the bass has its part in the story, how the piano comes in, how the vocalist comes in. And he taught me all these different lines, and I swear it was like plotting. It's like I learned how to plot at such a young age. And I started in screenwriting, then I shifted over to novel writing. And it really happened with Twilight. I was still working in television and I learned that this person wrote a book without, and she was like, she didn't call herself a novelist. And I was like, well, let me try. I tried. It took me like 5 years to write the first book. It was not publishable at all, but I kept at it. And then the next book took me 2 years. And then the next book took me a year. And then it just kept going down and down because if you practice something, you get better and better and better at it. And I was bit by the bug the first time that I published a book. It was a short serial that I published December of 2014. And people who weren't related to me bought it. I made $100 in that December. And I was just on fire and I just couldn't stop doing it. And I'm now doing it full time.
That first $100, you can't
Yes,
discount
ma'am.
it.
Amazing.
How about you, Katrina?
Yeah, I think I've always been a storyteller. I've always been a reader. I think it obviously starts there. And I was a very quiet, introverted child who could be easily appeased with the book. And so even as I think a kid, I thought I wanted to write, but like writing obviously as a kid meant that I was just, um, plagiarizing R.L. Stein, as we all do. Um, and as I grew, like I just found different outlets. So when I was in high school and college, I wrote a lot of poetry. Like I was a slam poet as a kid and I loved it. And then I stopped writing for a bit when I went to graduate school, where I was doing a lot of writing, but it was all academic writing. I'm a trained historian. That is a very different kind of storytelling that um, is a skill. But what I found is that it made me feel like I wasn't creative because I was sort of operating in a kind of formula for what academic writing should look like. And so I was maybe a couple of months from finishing my master's thesis when I started writing fan fiction. And then I was maybe a year out from having finished my dissertation when I started sort of writing fiction explicitly. Um, and for me, it was always like a sort of balance of academic writing and fiction because I could really think about um, how to tell a story in a way that had fewer restraints. And that was a lovely muscle to exercise, but it also ended up being really helpful for teaching as well. So they sort of fed back and forth with one another.
Hmm. Alexandria?
Um, Similar to Kat, I did a lot of writing poetry in my younger days. I was an avid reader from really, my mother, bless her, rest her soul, she claims that I started reading it too. So um, I was always a very avid reader, like the Sweet Valley High, Sweet Dreams, those books back in the day, moving on to suspense. I kind of read across all genres. And I always knew I was good at writing in school. I never saw it as a potential career because I come from a really academic family. My father's a physician, my mother was a teacher. So I thought those were my two lanes. I had to either be a doctor or a teacher. Ended up going to nursing school so I could take care of these children I had. And as my oldest went off to college, I started thinking, I knew that wasn't I guess you could say, my goal or my talent, where my talent, lay. So I started thinking it's got to be something I'm supposed to do other than just work a job. I was never the person that liked working a job, a 9 to 5. I even as a child, I felt like there was a legacy I was supposed to leave. And so I said, well, I've always been good at writing. Let me try that. And so I started writing, and it was like I couldn't stop. I wrote like 6 books in like 9 months. I just kept writing, and I published under a different name, a different genre for a while. And then I went to a conference, a romance conference, and I said, "Whoa, that's all these lines out the door." I said, "Oh, I'm gonna try that because that looks lucrative." So, and I'm a romance fan too. I said, I've been trained for years. I can do this, and so I started doing it, and it worked out. Beyond my thought of how it would work out. It worked out. It's been a great ride. So that's my journey.
Excellent. Well, romance readers are voracious. So if you
Hmm.
write 6 books in 9 months, we will read 6 books in 9 months.
Absolutely. I can't do that anymore now. I'm getting
Oh,
older, but
we'll read whatever you write. Katrina, I mean, when did you know you wanted to write particularly erotic romance, or even with some paranormal aspects or whatever, but like when did you know you wanted to write romance in particular?
Um, so I even though I write um other kinds of romance, I always want to sort of foreground that I write erotic romance because I came here from erotica. I
Mhm.
have loved erotica since I was too young to be reading it. Like I have very vivid memories of being at the Berkeley Public Library in Berkeley, California, where I went to school. Um, I was supposed to be reading other things, I'm sure, but I ended up in Anne Rice's section, and I took, her erotic series, the Sleeping Beauty series, out, and I just couched it between, something that looked normal and probably some other like, thriller thing, maybe an Anne Rice, right? Like the Vampire Lestat or whatever. And that library had just been renovated, so they had self checkout, which
Mm,
is every kid's like best friend for reading all the stuff they shouldn't be. And like I have very vivid memories of doing that. And I loved sort of thinking about pleasure, like even as like a kid who's like understanding her own body, right? Like reading about pleasure, however questionable in that particular series it might be, but as like a thing that you could get, I think was really important for me. And then when I got older, like my cousins gave me Zane. I was a huge fan of Zane when she
mm,
first started publishing, and still am. And I loved sort of foregrounding that like women could have pleasure. And so romance was not like a really large leap from like reading books where women's pleasure is at the center. And a lot of romance centers women's pleasure, not just sexually, like in the rest of their life as well. So for me, that sort of made a lot of sense.
mhm. Wow. Alexandria?
can you repeat the question?
Same question about when did you know particularly that you're going to write romance? And it sounds like it kind of was from that romance conference.
Yeah, that really kind of catapulted. I don't know why it didn't occur to me before, since that really was my training ground. But after I went to that conference, I said, well, I could try. I had never written sex scenes before then. I wasn't writing within that genre before. And so that was my biggest worry, but evidently I'm not bad at it. From what I'm told, I'm pretty good at it. So, and I do enjoy. I can say that I had lost the joy of writing when I was writing in the other space. And I have absolutely enjoyed every moment of writing romance and erotica, um, to the point where now the sex scenes are my favorite thing. If they could just have sex out the gate, I would be happy. And anybody who knows me, who I talk to, or when I'm talking through the books and everything, they'll tell you that I'm sitting there like, I don't understand why they got to meet first. Like, can't they just go and do it? So it is definitely my happy place, writing romance and writing erotica. And yeah, so yeah, the idea really got in my brain when I went to at conference and I saw how, I mean, everybody was just so happy too. They were just so happy to be buying these books. And I think that was like in November of that year. And I went home and I said, okay, my NaNoWriMo is going to be a romance that November. And it was. And I released it the day after Christmas. And so that's the rest is history.
How about you, Ines?
It never occurred to me to write anything but romance. Whereas Katrina was copying from R.L. Stein, I was copying from the Harlequins because I was like 12, 13. I didn't know what sex was except for, people in a room together and the waves crashing. So, I had tried to write one when I was way too young, but like I said before, TV was a stronger passion, and um, but when I came back full circle, it never occurred to me to write anything other than romance. Just like it never occurred to me to read anything other than romance or give my attention to something on television or in a film that didn't have romance. Like I don't, when there's no romance, my attention span is that big.
Mhm. Well, romance is part of life. So if it doesn't have it, then it doesn't feel real to me. So Alexandra, I want to dig into, I'm going to go into the indie publishing aspect of this in a minute, but before that, I want to ask about your own journey in terms of making sure that your voice, your Black voice, is being heard. And was that something that drove you to make sure, like, because there wasn't a lot of stories out there for Black readers, or what was it like for you to start publishing in that space?
Well, I guess I do the only thing I know to do because I grew up in a historically Black college town, predominantly Black town in Arkansas, ironically. And all I knew was Blackness, Black excellence. My parents instilled that into me. So that's the only culture I would know to put into anything. That's the only lens I've ever seen anything through. So I don't think it was even a conscious thought to me that I'm going to make everything really Black and the characters, the vernacular that I use. It's just reality. That's just how I grew up. My youngest child, I have three children. My youngest, when we moved from our town to a predominantly white town, and she said, I never understood what people meant when they said we were minorities until we got here. Because
Mhm.
all I knew was our town where we were the majority.
Mhm.
So I often say, and my oldest daughter often says, she didn't realize what a privilege growing up like that was. Now that she had grandchildren, she has children, and she thinks, wow, they don't know what that's like, where everything is Black. So I think I'm just recreating what I lived.
Mhm. I have a question about that, but I'm going to come back to it. Ines?
About Black voices.
Mhm.
Well,
Maybe I'll combine the question. Black voices in romance.
in romance, yeah. Obviously in romance, because that's what we do. Um, well, when I was reading, even when I was reading the Victorians and the Regencies, in my brain, they didn't, I was like, what is this porcelain skin and these pink nipples? Like, what is that? Because that's not how it looked in my mind. And I just assumed everybody else, when they were reading a book, they just made the people look like them because that's what you predominantly see, right? But when it comes to romance, romance to me is about escapism. So even though I'm writing, and I like writing multicultural characters because I like to explore different cultures. I like to pick cultures who are historically not necessarily don't get along. I like to make two people from those different cultures fall in love. So my books, even though they are completely on wide on with tons and tons of people of color, I don't focus on the issues that the media and society at large would attribute to people of color, people who are marginalized. I'm not interested in writing about racism. I'm not interested in writing about prejudices and microaggressions. I'm not interested in writing about people being harsh towards women because I want to escape when I read a book. And so when I'm writing a book, which takes a lot more time, I want to do the same thing. I'm escaping into that world. So I don't want to write about the issues that is put down upon us. So when I am writing these stories of Black folk, of people of Latin descendancy, of people of Asian descendancy, I'm writing stories about the celebration of cultures and the celebration of their love. And that's what I want to give voice to.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. Katrina?
I think it's actually a combo of both of them, so I'm happy I went after. Um, I mean, I'm from Northern California, so I grew up in a place where like Black people are not a majority, but like people of color are. Like I literally like I'm from a working class family, and most of my neighbors for most of my childhood ended up being like recent immigrants from Latin America. And so I grew up like hearing a lot of Spanish, like having like friends who had like families in different countries, etc. And I understood Blackness in that space. So I always say that like I'm writing books that look like the sort of cities I grew up in. So they are like diverse in that sense. But I have only ever been a Black woman. And so I can only ever come like write from that space. And so even if I'm writing like a diverse friend group, like I am making sure that like, all of these characters feel like whole people. Um, and for the Black characters, like that hurdle for me is a little less, high, right? Because like I am sort of coming from this space. Um, and I think, even though like romance has a very sordid history with like Black voices, I think when I came to being a reader, which then sort of informed me starting to publish, what I was surprised at were how many Black women that were there, if only you just barely scratched the surface, right? Like one Black author's book led me to another. And when I started publishing, one Black author like welcomed me to another. So I think it's also that part is also important, that it is not new, and that we have always been here.
Mm-hmm. And I want to go back to something Ines said about writing not being political, not, dealing with necessarily issues about the world and being, that. But so what is, is there any, do you feel any responsibility to do that because there are not enough Black voices out there ever? Or is it really just you want to talk about the joy? And so I'm going to start with you and then go back around.
See, maybe because I'm indie, I see the voices, I see the people who are having those conversations. So I don't feel the pressure to do it because I see people who are passionate about the issues being loud. Now, people don't want to listen. I don't know what you can do about that. But for me, because I live in the issues, I want to escape. I want the joy. So that's my reasoning for focusing on it, is because I want to just dive under into the pages of just joy.
Mm-hmm. Right. I think what I forgot to say was that a lot of times people don't think that certain populations have joy because they're only hearing about the difficulties. And so I think it's really nice that you focus on that so that people realize that we're just regular people having regular lives with sometimes with issues, like we have different issues maybe. So that's my opinion. You can, chat about it. But Katrina, what do you think about that? Do you feel any like I said, pressure to be that voice of Black joy or Black issues or Black, anything?
I used to be very vocal on Twitter, yes. But I think that like in terms of like my writing, I mean, I would not say any of my books is apolitical at all. Like I am a person writing from my own standpoint. There are things that I believe that inform how I write, period, right? Like and some of that is me personally, and also that is I am a historian of African American history. I don't really have I mean, I'm sure that I could, right? So other people could feel differently, but I don't really think I spent 6 years getting this degree and 10 years teaching students about the importance of Black history and the importance of looking at Black people contemporarily and historically as whole people. I don't think I could write outside of that framework. But what that means is, in the same way that I teach, like struggle and joy are actually the same thing, right? and you can write about those things, or not they're the same thing, they live in the same space, right? They live in our bodies, right? And so I can't really, especially for Black people, and I have a few stories that deal with like historical moments. I love a good dual timeline. Susanna Kearsley raised me, etc. But like, I don't think that it would be fair to pretend as if any of my characters don't live in a world that sees them and treats them as, like in this case, Black people, right? But is that the entirety of their life? Absolutely not, right? So often my characters talk about like racism in a way that is, for Black people, it is making light of what is actually quite heavy, right? Like that is often how like me as a person and then my characters like deal with that reality. So I never write as if it doesn't exist. I mean, I don't write fantasy. Maybe in a fantasy aspect I would, right? But like I'm writing about books that touch this world. And in this world, it would be unfair of me to not build my characters around what they might have to face, even if I know that that won't be the center of their story.
Hmm. I love that you said that about struggle and love. I really, that's so powerful. Alexandria.
My goal is to create well-rounded, three-dimensional people that are relatable to the people that read it, to my target audience. So there's good and bad in the world, in life. I don't write quote unquote struggle love, but I do want especially Black women to be able to see themselves in at least one of my characters. So if something's going on in the world, I'm a human, and if it affects me, it's going to probably end up in the book in some way. But I'm all about balance as well. So while something might make you sad, something's definitely going to make you laugh. And then something else is definitely going to make you probably pull out a vibrator or go get your husband. So, or wife or whatever. So, that's my goal is to, I've often told that my books are really relatable and realistic. So my people exist in this world, in this time, or as Katrina says, some in the past. I do have some dual timelines too. But I just want Black women to feel seen. So if that means that, like the book that's coming out in March, my third and probably final hockey book, um, um, she has albinism, but I don't make albinism a problem. She just has albinism. I just want rep across the board for Black women,
Mm-hmm.
all shades, all sizes, all economic, whatever. I want health wise, all of that. So that's where probably maybe there are some things that are political that show up, or because I'm writing in contemporary times, so which eventually will date it and make it historical because they're texting each other and stuff like that probably won't be a thing in the future. But my goal is just to make them, because they're real in my head, they're people in my head. So I just want to make it as realistic and relatable to especially the Black women, because all my heroines are Black women,
Mm-hmm.
um, and all my heroes are Black men. And some of them, a lot of men have told me they can relate too. So
Mm-hmm. I'm going to stay with you for a second, Alexandra, because I think you also write within the queer community.
I'm going to.
You are, oh, Katrina, you write in it. So I'm going to go back to Katrina. It's so I'm going to ask all of you actually.
I want to
Dolores
hear
is
about Alexandra. What you gonna do, ma'am? What's going on?
I have a signed to do a sapphic uh series, so I'm excited.
there is not enough of that. Please write
I
it.
am. I'm excited about it. I'm serious when I say I want all Black women to feel represented in my work. I'm serious about that. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, and that's Dolores's question is about what about writing in the LGBT community? So that sounds like you're going to be, Katrina, sounds like you have.
Yeah, a good portion of my catalog is polyamorous. I love writing polyamorous people, in particular bisexual people. I'm bisexual, but I also write like FF and MM. I think my like sweet spot is FFM. So yeah, like I love it.
And Ines,
Me too.
have you or are you going to?
I write poly as well. I love MMF when the swords cross.
I just need a minute.
I like that. Oh.
Okay. Yes, I didn't expect this conversation to start off with fellatio, which was happening before you guys all came in, or the swords crossing, but I love it.
Educational.
There are words that I just hadn't put together. Oh my God, it's so funny. So from what I'm hearing is that all of your books or in your thinking, you're really across the spectrum of human existence and experience.
Mhm.
Excellent. So I'm going to go back to the indie publishing because I'm very curious about this. Why did you choose to go indie versus trad, or did you try to go trad and then it didn't work out for you or something? So, uh, Ines, I'm going to start with you. What made you decide to go indie?
Well, I think a lot of how we're gonna answer this harkens back to what you just asked us and look at what our catalog is. Like we couldn't do this in a traditional setting. We
Hmm.
couldn't write hockey and then write sapphic and then write something else. I know you said some of your books take place in like BDSM club. Like we would be like pigeonholed. And
Hmm.
and being Black, we would be pigeonholed into only writing about the Black experience, and that's it. Where I might want to write paranormal, I might want to write aliens at another point. I don't necessarily just want to write about one experience. I want to write about love everywhere that I can consider it. And indie has allowed me to do that. Every once in a while, I think about going traditional or trying to go traditional, not like it's like a done deal. But but you have to think about like where would I fit in? Like I understand how to fit in on Amazon's or Nooks. I know how to fit into their categories because their categories are about what readers want. Whereas I feel like traditional, their categories are completely different than what readers are saying, this is what I want, and I can speak directly to readers. I can give them what they want if it's in my heart to write that. And then we can come together. We don't need a middleman to do that. So this is so lucrative for people who think like us and want to write outside of the box.
Hmm. Absolutely. And there's so many people reading indie now because of that as
Yeah.
well. Katrina, what was your decision making tree?
I don't know that I really made a decision. I was just like, I have written this thing. Oh, here is the blog telling me how to put it on Amazon. I'm going to do that. And it was as accidental as that. But I've stayed indie for actually some of the reasons Ines said, in the sense that I like to be able to not pigeonhole myself. Like, I absolutely have more than once said, I wonder if I could write a mafia romance. I wonder if I could write like a dual timeline, whatever. I wonder if I could write sad erotica because it has been a rough year. And the answer is yes, I can. And I can sell it, right? So I think that like um uh one of the things that for me like makes indie so special across the board is the way that it sort of pushes you past what traditional publishing might tell you there is a market for, right? When I started publishing, if you had said, "Oh yes, an all black polyamorous romance," people will read that. No, they will. No people. They said no people would read that, right? Like, you could do that with white characters, but black characters, no, because black characters don't read like queer romances. And then I was like, here is one polyamorous romance after another, and I think that reality that what can sell when you're indie, it is expansive because
Hmm.
you, as Inez said, like don't really have that mediator.
Hmm. Alexandria?
Um, I did query early on when I was in the other career of writing, the other genre, and I was turned down, rightfully so. It was horrible. But looking back at it now, it's like the first thing I wrote. I'm like, that is pretty bad. But I kept writing, and I don't know, because I had absolutely no confidence in what I was doing. I think something inside me just drove me to believe that this needs to be, my books need to be read. They need to be out there. And I contacted an author I was following on Facebook. My daughter was in college and she was telling me, my oldest, she said, you should do like my friend. She wants to be an author. She's following all these authors to see what they're doing. I said, oh, okay. So I did that. I don't even think I had a Facebook page. I just had to make all this stuff because I wasn't even on social media. And I contacted one I was following and I saw that she was successful. And I said, well, I was going to ask her who she's with, because indie just didn't even pop into my head at that point. And she said, oh, I made my own company and I did this. And she like laid it. This woman knew me from no one. I was following her. I mean, we were friends on Facebook, but we didn't know each other. And she wrote urban fiction. And she said, I did this and I did that and I did that. And I just started my own company and I just published it myself. And I said, oh. So I did everything she said and started doing it. And I'm eternally grateful to her because she didn't have to tell me anything because I didn't know. And so now I'm glad I went indie because like in it says I mean there's no box, there are no walls. I can write exactly anything I want the way I want. And I have had experience where a publisher was interested, but they wanted me to change up the whole everything I was going to do for the series. This doesn't sell. That's not going to sell. That's not going to sell. I'm like, yeah, it will. I know it will. It'll sell to my readers. I don't know what you know. So I'm like, I'm good. I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing because I know what will sell to my readers.
Mhm.
And my readers are keeping me housed and with lights. So I trust them to buy the word, you know.
Mhm.
So I love being indie. I love pushing the boundaries of what I'm doing and just I just woke up one day and said I'm gonna write a sapphic trilogy. So, I couldn't do that under contract with someone, so
Thank you. Which brings me to a question here about pros and cons of indie writing, which is an interesting question here is like, do you find ease in finding your audience? Because that's what I always thought was the hardest thing is to find your readers if you're indie. You don't have a publisher or a publicist behind you sending you on book tours or whatever. Katrina, can you start with on your how you found your audience?
I think some of it's luck, if I'm being honest with you. Like, right, like that for those first few readers who are not your friends and family, right? Like, they're I think the hardest. And some of it is luck, but I think I've said this throughout my entire career. Word of mouth has been literally the thing that sells books. And to be fair, that's true whether you are trad or indie published, right? Like, word of mouth is better in a lot of ways than you putting a lot of money in Amazon ads, right? Like it's better than you sort of swapping a newsletter, which is another popular strategy. Because if someone that you trust recommends a book to you, right, then that's what matters. And I think like to this day, I'm still getting people who are like, oh, I read, my first book by you because of X, Y, and Z, right? Or we were talking about the special edition cover to Office Hours. That also sold because of word of mouth. Like someone had bought a resale copy, it was a special edition, they bought it, and then showed all their friends in a group chat. And my very first sale at Book Bonanza, which is where that picture was taken, was someone saying, I'm here for the spicy cover, I saw it in my group chat. Like, and that happened for the rest of the day. Like word of mouth is, I think, the most important thing for the early readers, and then also sustaining your readers over time.
Hmm. Alexandria, how did you find your readers?
um I think partly, but I kind of had a good education in what to do from the working in the other genre. I kind of knew how to build a platform and author platform and all that stuff. But I do want to say that it's not easy for anybody, even if you're traditionally published. Not everybody that's traditionally published has the backing of being sent on tours and all that stuff. So it's work for all of us. Everybody has to put in the work. But for me, I think it might have been a combination of the book covers and the content. I think the story being good is lost on a lot of authors. You need to have a good story, and that's where the word of mouth comes in. And I'm not saying that I'm just an expert, but um, I think the work kind of speaks for itself in a lot of ways. And
Mhm.
then of course, like I said, the cover, and I did do some marketing. A lot of it was just organic though.
Mhm.
And I think it was just my time for people to find me and want to read what I was writing, and definitely what I was writing. I think it was different,
Mhm.
although we have a vast amount of Black romance authors right now. This is like the Renaissance, or so it's like the best time to be a romance reader because of
Mhm.
the landscape, because it's just any week there are probably 40, 50 new Black romance books coming out.
Mhm.
um, but I think what makes you stand out is consistency and just stories, good stories.
Mhm.
Um, because mine is really largely was word of mouth,
Mhm.
and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, and you can tell from the chat that once somebody finds you, they're loyal to you because of the
Mhm.
writing, because you're a great writer. Like if once you like the writing, then you're gonna just follow. And Ness,
Yeah.
what about you? How did you find your readership?
I'm very scientific and analytical. Um, and so I went about it a different way. I went about it as I looked at the marketplace. I looked at the marketplace and I looked and saw what was selling. And the biggest bookstore in the world is Amazon. And so I went to Amazon and I looked at their bestseller charts. I looked at the best-selling romances, and then you can drill down because there's some things that I'm just not interested in writing. Like I don't think I can write a dark romance. I'm going to try, but I don't think that I can. I have no interest in writing Amish romance, you know. So I just looked at I love paranormal romance. We'll read it every single day. I love Marriage of Convenience. We'll read it any way you give it to me. Regency, on being abducted by a spaceship, on a road trip. I don't care. If you force them into proximity, I will be there. So there are categories, and I looked at the best-selling categories, and I crossed that with this is what's selling because this is what readers, and this is all readers. This is the charts are based upon readers purchasing. Nobody's like manipulating it. I looked at what was charting. I looked at what I love to write, and I put that in a Venn diagram, and that part in the middle, that's what I wrote. And so the readers were already there, so I knew I could put it in the category. I knew that I could go onto the social sites and say hashtag marriage of convenience or hashtag alpha hole. I could do that, and they would, because readers are chatting about that, because readers wanted more of that, because Trad is saying that's dead, vampires are dead, or nobody wants to read a hockey romance. Who cares about hockey? And then you have all these readers talking about it, you have it charting. So that's what I did. I took a very scientific approach to my art, and
Mhm.
I got in that Venn diagram, and then I got to where those people were and put the book in front of them
Mhm.
and went from there.
Wow. I love all these different stories. So
There's
interesting.
so, but you guys people on the call, you should feel so encouraged by this because there's more than one way to succeed in this industry.
Mm.
And women in the romance area, we will tell you, we will tell you our business plan. We will grab you by the hand and say, girlfriend, no, don't do it that way. Take a look and do it this way. This is a better way. Let me show you. That's the beauty of indie romance.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And I have to say that romance community has always been the one that I have found to be the most supportive of its writers. Um, there's always, alpha holes everywhere, but just generally speaking. Um, so Tamala asked this really interesting question because, and I'm going to go back to you, Alexandra, about this because you just said there's more Black romances coming out every day, and she asks if you think the Black romance market is saturated because she's trying to put out a book and she wants to do it, but she's not really sure. But I think, like from my perspective, it's not saturated. It's not enough. So like I was really surprised when you said that so many books are coming out. What's your perspective on this?
No, I don't think it's saturated. Romance readers, as you said earlier, are too voracious. I can't keep them fed. None of us on this call can keep them fed because they read several books a week. They're year in. I'm on TikTok looking at their year in. How they met their goals. Some of these people have read like 600 books in a year. So it's definitely not saturated. There's a market and an audience for every single book by every single author. You just have to find your audience. They're not all the same size, but I would encourage anybody that has a book within them that they want to write it. There's always going to be somebody out there that's going to enjoy what you're doing, especially if you're bringing something unique. I would say trust your voice. Don't try to emulate anybody else, and just bring something different, something unique, and you'll be fine.
Mhm. Thank you. Ines?
I felt like she answered it perfectly. Go on, Katrina, if you have something else to say.
I did. I wanted to specifically talk about like Black romance and where it's not oversaturated, right? I think a lot of people look at contemporary Black romance, which again is such a small number of a very large whole, even if you include Indian trad. But if you look at other subgenres, that's not the case. Like, there is, name another person writing Black historical romance that isn't Beverly Jenkins.
Joan Vassar.
I can, but they're all
Sorry,
indie.
yes. And Joan, but and that's great dichotomy. One indie, one trad, like literally, right? And we haven't had, I mean, Joan just published a book, but Miss Beverly Jenkins hasn't published one. Alyssa hasn't published a historical romance in also many years, right? Like, there just are not enough, right? And even in places where Black women love to go play, like paranormal, how many are there writing Black romance specifically? So I think that like this idea that people often have that like Black romances are oversaturated, or there are so many of them, or there are too many of them. I think sometimes we should remember like what romance publishing looks like at a broader level, which is way more than us, but also like think about if your community isn't feeding back to you the thing you're looking for, right? Which is a great example of what Alexandria said, which is that's your audience. Like, if there are people who want this thing and you're seeing things like your writing or your book, that should let you know then that there's an audience there already.
Mhm. So I'm going to ask you to keep going, Katrina, and give some advice to any aspiring indie authors who are Black.
I think, broadly speaking, right? Like, I think Alexandria's point about like bringing something new to the table is, I think, good in general. It will be good in terms of marketing, but I think you identifying what is specific and important for you, what whole, I mean, if we're sort of looking at Toni Morrison, right? Like, if there's a book you want to read, then write it, right? Then thinking about what you're not finding in those places that you want to fill. And having read, since I've read the other two, right, we're all very different, right? Like, very different, like, you know, audiences and markets, even if they often might overlap, right? So I think figuring that out will be helpful for you in finding your audience. But I think it's also important because publishing is difficult, right? Every book doesn't hit the same, right? It takes a bit of time to when you try something new to find your audience. So that's also the thing to remember when it is a bit harder for you to sort of put one foot in front of the other. And then I think also find your people in terms of other authors, but in terms of readers as well, right? So a lot of my early readers, like, I know literally by name because there were so few of them that I know them literally by name, right? Um, and I can remember the authors who were really kind and like sort of, you know, stuck a hand out to help me when I didn't know how to, before I could afford Vellum and I was formatting my paperbacks in Word, right? Like I remember all of that advice. So like I find your people would be the other thing I'd say.
Ines?
The advice for a new Black author,
Mm-hmm.
write your next book. You're gonna hear people say that a lot, and sometimes they'll say it in a flip way, but I mean it very seriously, because just as you need to find your readers and you need to find your author friends, you need to really make sure you have found your voice. And I think the best way to do that, in my opinion, is not to keep revising the first chapter. It's to get to the end and then to write the next book and get to the end and put it out and then write the next book. Because remember, I said my first book took me 5 years. It was awful. My dream is to one day publish that book, but I don't know if it's fixable. And then the next year it took me 2 years. And the next time it took me a year. And the next time it took me less and less and less. And I got better and better and better. And not only did I get better, when I looked behind me and I had people following me all of a sudden, they had a lot of books to go back on, and I keep making money off of those books. My 10-year published anniversary is coming up in December with that very first book that I made $100 on, that's MMF, polyamory, and the Swords Cross. My audience is completely different now, but bet I'm gonna sell them that book and say, look, guys, this is my first book when I started. And because I have a whole bunch more people following me and they trust me and I still believe in that book, I should be able to get them to buy. So write the next book.
That is amazing. Amazingly good advice. Alexandria?
My first bit of advice is always to read,
Mm.
because I personally don't believe you can be a good writer unless you are a good reader.
Mm.
So, and I would say read in the genre you want to write, but just read across genres if you can, because you can learn from all genres. I heavily read thrillers and suspense and horror, but I write romance, but I still learn about the mechanics of writing and storytelling through those other genres. Um, and like Ines said, just write, just sit down and write. A lot of people overthink it. Just write it. That if it doesn't sound right to you, there are editors that can help you. Just write the book. So many people come to me and say, "Well, how did you get started?" I said, "I just sat down and wrote the book. You just have to sit down and write it. It's not going to be perfect in the beginning. It's all these books in, which is like told between the two careers. For me, it's like 60 something books. I don't write a perfect book the first time I write it, well, I don't rewrite because I'm too lazy, but I go in and fix some things, but it's not going to be perfect. And the next bit of advice I would give is that not everybody's going to like what you write, but that doesn't mean nobody's going to like it.
Mm.
Don't get hung up on criticism. Take it constructively and move on.
Mhm.
That would
Wow.
be.
You guys are so smart. I'm learning so much. Siobhan asked this question a while ago. I hope she's still here. What does your writing routine look like, Ines?
So I took the Clifton Strengths test, and my number one strength is discipline. My second strength is achiever. So every morning I get up, and I'm at my desk at 8 a.m. and I write until about 11:30, take a lunch break, or forget to eat, whatever. And then I either start out working on another manuscript or I'm doing marketing, and I do that every weekday. And I take the weekends off by usually by plotting. That feels very luxurious to me, is to sit down and plot the next story. Um, and by having that disciplined routine, I get out a lot of books.
Hmm. Discipline. Katrina?
I'm similar, although it sort of fluctuates for me, like during the year. I'm a professor, so a lot of my writing time is sort of centered around when I have to like literally be on campus and teaching, or when I have to grade, or whatever I'm doing for that. When I should be reading, which I'm usually not, I'm napping. So I'm already feeling Alexandria's advice on this one. Um, but I am certainly a morning writer and an evening writer. So if I can get, like, I wake up, around 6 a.m. So if I can like get at my computer between 7 and 8, like I'll be here until about between 9 and 11, depending on like what I have to do that day. If I have to go into to teach, that might be all the writing I'll do. So I'll stay here until I have to leave. Um, I do also write on weekends because they are, generally speaking, the only kind of time that my students don't expect for me to respond to their email, um, which is actually unhealthy. So don't do that. But that is what I'm doing right now. And then in the summers, I will sort of write more, but fewer days.
Wow. Okay. And Alexandria.
I have no routine. Feel like an underachiever here. Um, I just I write when I know that I'm ready to. I have to work it out in my head. I'm a pantser. I don't take notes. If I took notes, I wouldn't write the book because I feel like I'd written the book. I don't outline. I think I'm allergic to that. I tried, and the character said, "Yeah, that's what you thought was gonna happen." So I just don't even bother with that now. But when I'm ready, when I know, I say, okay, I need to start really getting this in my head and start writing this because I need to get it done. So once I got everything in my head, I just start writing. and I used to word app in my phone. And a lot of times I'll just roll over in bed, get the phone, write 1,000, 2,000 words and roll back over and go to sleep.
I have
And
never
I'll
heard
do
that.
and I'll do that till I'm done. And it depends on, once I hit 10,000 words, I say, okay, I've gotten comfortable with the characters. I kind of know, because like I remember I didn't plan anything. So I'm like, okay, I kind of know these people now. I just zoom after that. I can get done really quick. But yeah, I roll over, I get the phone. I'm like, okay, yeah, that sounds good. And then I put it down, I write till I'm satisfied with what I've done. And it could be, if I'm in that zone, you might catch me sitting around anywhere, just steady typing on the phone, because I'm in the zone at that point and I can't stop myself from writing. But yeah, I have written, I want to say, a good 20 books totally in my phone on the Word app. And then I had to get on the computer and do the actual format, because it looks a mess, because I don't have the margins and stuff. But yeah, that's what I do. I write them in the phone, and that way I can write anywhere. At the doctor's office, at somebody else's house. I'm watching TV for the sound, and I'm writing in my phone at home. So that's how I do it.
I think Morgan called it. I'm like shocked. Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
It's strange, but yeah, now the typos are egregious once I go through
Yeah,
it.
that's what would drive me crazy.
When I'm going through it after I read this last one was the first one, I literally wrote the whole thing before I went in and fixed anything and got it formatted. And I was like, what was I trying to say? So I
Oh
had to
my
make something else up. But yeah, that's how I do it.
Well, that is impressive. Um, okay, so last question, because I don't know if I can take much more. Of you guys being so incredibly interesting. Is name one Black indie romance author that you would recommend to us, that is not on this panel. Katrina.
I'm a really I'm so a lot of indies are my friends, but I'm a really big fan of Tia Love. I really like not just her books, but also the way that she thinks and talks about her writing. And as an author, it's always nice to find someone who I enjoy reading, but also enjoy like sort of meeting them and sort of hearing their process as well. So Tia Love.
Excellent. Oh, I'm gonna have to look them up. Alexandria.
Just one.
Oh, yes, let's
Oh,
start with one.
okay. Then I'm gonna have to plug my girl Joan Vassar again. And she does do a little more than just romance. It's historical fiction, kind of it's romance, adventure. She's just brilliant. She's absolutely brilliant. She's also my buddy now. She made me be her friend, because because I was bragging about her books on my Facebook page. She said, "Well, you're just gonna have to be my friend." So now we're friends, and it's just her books are an experience. Anybody who has not read the Black series, please get it in your life. Please get it in your life. When I met her, I said, I don't know what to say. I've never read anything that brilliant. And if you like audiobooks, that's the way to go. The audiobooks are transformative. They are excellent.
Mhm.
So yeah, she does have one dark romance. Unfortunately, Francine. Anything I read by her, I'm like, how do I know her? Because it's so good. But yeah, Joan Vassar.
Joan Vassar. Okay, and Ines.
I would recommend highly El Penelope's Earth Girl Chronicles. She
Mm,
was hailed by Time Magazine as a master class in world building.
yes, I would agree with that. No question. Wow, this is amazing. We still have, I could ask many, many more questions, but I think I'm going to let you go for tonight. But thank you so much for all of well, obviously your time, but your insights that have helped so many people, I think, that are here tonight. So I really appreciate you joining me and answering all of our questions.
Thank you.
That's the letter L, Penelope, Ersinger Chronicles.
They're so good. So have a wonderful night, and thank you all for being here and joining us and all of your wonderful questions.
Thanks,
So,
guys.
good
Bye.
night, everybody.